Have you ever stood by the edge of a cold northern sea just before dawn and felt that the world was not waking but remembering? Have you felt that chill that creeps not on your skin, but somewhere deeper, like the tide running through your bones? There is a silence before the wind rises, a hush that does not belong to sleep or even to death. It belongs to the old world, the one with no name, where all the oaths are kept. They say that in the time of longships and frost-bitten stars, there was a warrior who bound his soul not to a blade, nor to his clan, but to the sea itself. He had no name that we can speak, for it is said that to speak it is to summon the waves. But he walked with the bearing of one touched by something older than men, something salted and endless and cold. He was born on a night when the auroras whispered like breath across the black sky. His mother, they say, died in the bearing of him. Her last words were not words at all, but the sound of surf against rock. His father vanished before he could speak his first word, taken by a sea storm so sudden, no scald could rhyme its shape. The villagers who raised him did not call him child. They called him stranger. And stranger he was, always silent, always still, with eyes like the underside of ice. He was drawn to the water from his first breath. As a boy, he walked barefoot along the shorelines even in winter, his skin purpled and raw, but never shivering. He listened to the surf as others listened to stories, and when storms came, he stood outside his hut, arms open to the sky, as if waiting to be taken. They say that once, when he was still young, he walked straight into the fjord and did not return for 3 days. And when he did, pale, soaked and rimmed in frost, he said only, "I saw the one below." The elders made the warding signs. They fed him warm broth and tried to speak of gods and monsters, of Odin's fury and Ran's nets. But he would not listen. His gaze was beyond them, drawn not to the gods of ash and fire, but to the old deep, the god who wears no name. From that day onward he was not called stranger anymore. They called him the bound one, the one who had tied himself heart and soul to something unseen, something vast. In time, he grew strong, broad-shouldered, quiet-mouthed, bearing a sword carved not with runes, but with the shapes of waves and the curling teeth of fish. He joined the raids, but never for gold. When others took silver and silks, he took only water, a bowl filled from each sea they crossed, kept in a seal bladder pouch on his hip. He spoke to no one of what he did with it, but when they made camp, he would pour it out upon the stones and whisper into the wind, always whispering, never loud. It was said he never slept on land. He slept only aboard the longship, or on the shore with his back against driftwood facing the tide. And when battles came, he did not scream or chant like the berserkers. He fought as the sea fights, relentless, cold, without joy and without anger. The rhythm of his sword was like the pulling of the undertow, and none who fought him stood long. But the legend truly begins in the year the mists never lifted. It was a strange summer. The sun rose dim and hung low like a dying eye. The birds did not sing, and the winds came from the north, though no snow fell. The fjords breathed strange fogs, thick and unmoving, like lungs exhaling sorrow. One evening, the bound one stood upon the prow of his ship, as it floated silently in the cove. He stared into the mist, unmoving, as if waiting for it to speak, and then he stepped forward off the wood, into the water, and walked until the sea covered him. The crew cried out, but none dared follow. They waited, breath held, hearts thunder loud. Hours passed. The fog thickened. Then, just as the last light faded from the sky, he returned. In his arms was a stone, black, wet, and carved with spirals that moved when you blinked. He placed it in the center of the deck and said, "He has No one asked who he meant. They felt it in their marrow. The deep god, the one older than all the Aesir, the one who sleeps beneath the sea. That night, he lit no fire. He stood beside the stone and sang a low sound, like the creak of ice underfoot or the murmur of whale song. And in the morning he was gone again. The crew searched for him until the fog swallowed their torches. They waited, prayed, and cursed. But he did not return. Days passed, then weeks. The villagers said the sea had taken him. The skalds began to craft verses of his madness. But then on the seventh tide, the sea rose higher than it ever had before. Not in rage, but in reverence. It swept through the village, touching every door, and then returned, leaving not a single life lost. And on the shore, where the tide had stopped, was the stone. The same black stone, with its spirals, still pulsing faintly, faintly. They understood then. He was not lost. He had been claimed, taken not by death but by vow, taken as the sea takes the moonlight, quietly, forever. They say even now that on certain nights when the wind dies and the sky forgets its stars, you can see a figure walking the shoreline, barefoot and silent. He carries no sword, he carries no name, but the sea rises gently to meet his feet, and if you press your ear to the waves, you may hear the song he hums. It has no words, only memory. It is the song of the sea beneath their oaths, the place where every vow still echoes, still breathes, still binds. And so it was, but the mist holds another tale. Have you ever heard the sea go quiet? Not calm, not still, but quiet. A hush so vast it folds your breath into it, like snow on moss, like a blanket over memory. That silence does not come often. But when it does, the old ones say, "Be still." The Kraken stirs in its sleep. They say the Kraken is not what you think. Not a beast with tentacles and rage, not a monster of salt and hunger. It is not one thing at all. It is a memory, a pulse, a rhythm, a thought the sea once had and never quite forgot. And so it was, long ago, that a ship named Moonwake slipped from the harbor of a forgotten fjord, its sails stitched from the wool of black sheep, its hull sealed with the blood of 3 kings. No one knows who built her. Some say she was carved from driftwood, left by a drowned god. Others whisper she rose herself from the seabed, summoned by a woman who sang only in dreams. Her figurehead bore no dragon, no beast, only a face, a woman's face, mouth open in silent grief, tears carved so finely they glistened like ice. The crew that sailed her were not raiders, not traders, not even warriors. They were seekers. Each of them had been called in dreams, dreams filled with dark water, and a voice like a deep bell, slow and steady, saying only, "Come." There were 9 of them. 9 souls who had nothing left to lose. One had buried a child who drowned in still water. Another had seen his village swallowed by fog. A third was born of no mother, washed ashore as a babe in kelp and shell. They brought no food, no torches, no maps, only a cage, iron forged, silent, chained with runes no skald could read. They said they were not going to trap the Kraken. They said the Kraken had summoned the cage itself. And so Moonwake sailed, vanishing into a fog that did not rise, a sea path that shifted with the breath of the deep. Days passed, then weeks. The ocean changed. The birds no longer followed. The stars forgot their names. Even the moon grew thin, as if afraid to look too long. One by one, the crew began to change. The one who had buried her son no longer slept. Her eyes stayed wide, shining with salt. She spoke only to the sea, whispering lullabies in languages never heard before. The one born of no mother began to bleed from his palms, not blood, but ink-black water that hissed when it touched the deck. And the one who had lost his village said he could see shadows beneath the ship. Not fish, not whales, shapes, thoughts, cities made of bone and coral, faces with no eyes. Still, they sailed on. On the 12th night, the sea turned to glass, not calm, glass. So still the ship could no longer move. The sails hung limp. The ropes were silent. They dropped anchor, but it did not touch bottom. They dropped a lantern. It vanished without splash or flicker. And then the whisper came. It was not a sound, it was a feeling, a breath against the soul, a hush that curled inside them like a hook. They brought forth the cage. It pulsed faintly, as if it too had a heartbeat, and they lowered it into the water, not with rope, but with silence, one breath each, exhaled into the air, like an offering. As the last breath was given, the sea groaned. It was not loud, but it shook the ribs, it turned the sky a darker gray. It made the birds fall still in the air, and something rose, not a shape, not a beast, a presence. The water domed, rising around the ship like a held breath. The ship groaned, not from pressure, from awe. Beneath them something vast was watching, not awake, but aware. The 9 dropped to their knees. None wept, none spoke. Only the one born of no mother stood. He stepped to the edge of the ship, looked down, and whispered, "I remember." The sea pulsed. A single tendril rose, not slick, not scaled, something like darkness given weight. It brushed his cheek, and then it was gone. The sea flattened. The wind returned, but the cage did not. It had been taken, or accepted. They sailed back, changed, all but the one born of no mother, who dove overboard that night and was never seen again. The rest returned to the fjord of their departure, but it was no longer there. In its place, cliffs of black stone. No huts, no docks, no smoke. Only one stone cairn, newly built, with 9 stones. And the 10th missed. The moonwake was left at sea. She drifts still, it is said. Her sails never tattered. Her figurehead always weeping. Some say she appears before storms, as a warning. Others say she only shows herself to those the Kraken has marked. But none deny the cage is gone. And the sea remembers. In its deepest hush, in the stillness before the wave breaks, in the silence that folds around you like a closing eye, there is the echo of the call. The Kraken does not rage. It does not strike. It waits. It wants. And the cage they gave it, it was never to trap it. It was to welcome it. For the sea forgets nothing, and the Kraken is memory made vast. So next time the sea grows still, not calm, but still, and the wind forgets its name, listen. Do you hear the hush? Do you feel the pull? That is where the Kraken sleeps, and it dreams of you. And further still, there is one more story. Have you ever seen a light on the sea when no fire should be there? A glow that floats just above the waves, pulsing slow like breath, never moving with the wind. If you follow it, they say you will never return. But if you do not follow, it may still find you. This is the story of such a light, and the one who dared to walk into it. It begins, not with a storm, but with stillness. A night when the sea lay cold and flat, and the wind forgot to speak. The stars above were pale and stretched, thin as old parchment, and the moon was a hook, silver and sharp. Far from any village, there lies an island that appears only when the fog permits. No map marks it, no name remembers it, but it has always been there, a long black shape of stone rising from the sea like the back of something vast, just beneath the surface. On that island stands a lantern, tall, made of iron, bound in rust and silence. It was never built, it was left, and it burns with a blue fire that does not flicker. They say the flame is the breath of the drowned, and they say it burns not to guide ships, but to call the Draugr home. Who are the Draugr? They are the unquiet dead, not spirits, not ghosts, flesh that refuses the grave, sailors who sank in anger, warriors who fell with hatred sharp in their chests, widows who walked into the sea and changed their minds too late. They do not walk the land, they walk the tide. When the mist curls low and the shore feels colder than it should, that is when they come. And it was on such a night that Hoia first saw the lantern. Hoia was not of the coast. She was born in the valleys, where the grass grows long and the wolves sing to the sky. Her people did not speak of the sea. They spoke of stone and wind, of bears and pine, but the sea called her all the same. As a child, she would walk for days until she found the ocean, and she would sit there, feet tucked beneath her, eyes wide, as if waiting for someone. She did not know who, but she always felt that the tide knew her name. She came of age during the winter of long silence, when no birds sang and the trees stood still. Her brother, a fisherman, took to the sea in search of better waters and never returned. They found his boat, empty, drifting toward shore, and on the seat, his coat, folded, with a single black feather on top. She mourned, as all do, but mourning did not answer her questions. She began to walk the coast again, farther than before. Listening, she met the old women who sat on cliffs and spoke to gulls. She brought them bread and fish, and they gave her words in return. Strange tales, half muttered, of lights at sea and bones that still walk. And one day, one of them said, "If you want to see what took him, follow the blue fire, but be ready to lose your breath." Hoia waited years before she saw it. She was 30 winters when the sea grew silent. She stood alone on the cliffs, hair silvered by salt, cloak pulled tight, and there, just beyond the surf, it glowed. Not bright, not warm, just steady, cold, blue. She followed, down the rocks, across the sand, into the water, and the light moved, just ahead of her, always just out of reach. She walked until the sea reached her waist, then her chest, then her throat. Still, she walked. When the water covered her, she did not drown. She drifted, down and down, her breath held not by lungs, but by memory. And there below the surface, she saw them, the Draugr. Not skeletons, not corpses, but shapes of sorrow, their skin pale as moonstone, their eyes dark and full of ocean. Some bore wounds, others carried ropes or anchors, but all of them moved with grace, with purpose, and all of them followed the light. It floated before them, like a promise, and she followed too. The sea did not choke her. It welcomed her, cradled her like a mother. She walked among the dead, and none touched her, until one did. A hand, cold, wide, scarred, reached out and brushed her cheek. She turned. It was her brother. His face was unchanged. His eyes were his own. But his mouth did not move and his breath did not stir the water. He placed his hand on her chest, and she felt grief, so deep it cracked the marrow. Not his, her. All the years she had waited, all the words never spoken, all the laughter lost. It passed between them like a tide, and then, slowly, he turned and walked on, following the light. She followed too, until the lantern rose above them, tall, ancient, burning. They gathered there, not to worship, not to pray, to remember. They stood, unmoving, and the blue flame pulsed. Each beat was a name. Each flicker was a breath that had once been, and Hoia understood. This was not a curse. It was a keeping. The Draugr were not monsters. They were memory given form, grief with weight, longing that refused to vanish. The lantern was their tether, their anchor. It burned so they would not be forgotten. She returned to the surface with the tide. No ship saw her rise. No gull marked her passing. But she walked from the waves, barefoot and still. And the old women on the cliffs did not ask where she had been. They saw it in her eyes, the tide mark of knowing. From that day on, she built her home near the sea. She never married, never left. Each night she lit a lantern on the shore, not blue but golden, a small echo of the great flame below, and she sang. Not songs of sorrow, but songs of remembrance, of faces, of names, of breaths that still echoed. And it is said that on certain nights, when the fog rolls low and the sea holds its breath, you can see two lanterns, one above, one below, and between them, the shapes of those who walk the tide, not lost, not damned, just remembered. For not all who die are gone, and not all who grieve are left behind. Some lights never dim, some love never leaves the water. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever heard weeping where no one stands? Have you sat upon the cliffs at dusk and thought the wind carried sorrow, not storm? They say the sea does not weep, but that is not true. She weeps in tides, in the slow retreat of waves, in the hush before the gulls cry. And sometimes she weeps through the voice of the salt wife. Long ago, before the fjords had names and the long ships sang across the cold belly of the ocean, there was a girl who was born beneath a lunar eclipse. Her mother labored alone, her cries muffled by the surf, and as the first shadow fell across the moon, the girl slipped into the world with not a scream, but silence. They named her Solva, which means the hushed sea. She was strange from the beginning. Her skin never burned, even when the sun sat high and fierce. Her hair smelled always of brine. And no matter how far her family moved inland, Solva would always find her way back to the cliffs, walking alone, barefoot, eyes half closed, listening. Listening to what? Her father once asked her. She did not answer, but she always returned with a pebble, smooth and black, still wet with the taste of the tide. When she came of age, she was courted by the son of a war chief, handsome, proud, bright-eyed, as the morning. His name was He was known for his boldness, his way with stories, and the way his voice filled the longhouse like music. But it was not his voice that won her. It was his silence. For when he sat beside her on the cliffs and did not speak, and did not question, and did not try to name what could not be named, she loved. They wed, in spring, beneath the standing stones. She wore no crown, only a simple thread of seagrass woven by her own hands. And when he lifted her veil, they say the wind stilled, as if even the sky wished to watch. But happiness is as fragile as mist. And like mist, it can be blown away by even the softest storm. Veteran was called to sea, as many are, a voyage south, to trade, to raid, to prove his worth. Solva did not beg him to stay. She kissed his brow, and gave him one of her stones, the wettest, the darkest, one that pulsed faintly in the hand. He asked what it was. She said, "It will remember you." He smiled, tucked it in his belt, and left. The ship never returned. There was no wreckage, no messenger, no bird, only silence. And the sea grew strange. The fish swam deeper. The tides grew uncertain. The fog came early and left. Solva walked the cliffs, as always, but now she sang, not to the sea, for it. Her voice was soft, broken, the way old wood creaks in wind. And each night she wept, though none ever saw the tears. Then, one night, she did not return. They searched the cliffs, the shore, the forests, nothing. Only her cloak, folded, left on a flat stone where the sea reached in spring, and beside it, a single black stone, pulsing with salt. The elders called her lost, but the old women shook their heads. She is not lost, they said. She has remembered too much. Years passed. The story faded, but the sea did not forget. For on certain nights, when the wind hushes and the stars blur behind thin clouds, a figure walks the cliffs. She wears no cloak. Her feet do not touch the stone. Her hair floats, as if always under water, and from her eyes silver tears fall, not down but upward, drifting into the sky like smoke. She is the salt wife now, no longer Solva, no longer woman. Something between. A spirit, yes, but not cruel. She does not curse, nor lure. She remembers, and in her remembering, others feel. Fishermen say their boats drift too close to the cliffs on moonless nights, and they hear weeping in the wind. Not loud, not fearful, just grieving. And those who have lost someone to the sea, a brother, a wife, a child, say that when they sit by the shore and whisper the names into the tide, they feel a warmth on their cheek, like a hand brushing a tear away. They say that is her, the salt wife, Solva. Still grieving, still walking, still waiting. But waiting for what? They say she waits for a name. Not Vedder. That name is gone, returned to the depths. No. A name. No one has yet spoken. A name made of breath and tide and hush. A name that once spoken will calm the sea forever. Until then, she weeps. Her tears feed the sea. And the sea, in turn, remembers for her. There is one tale, soft, almost forgotten, that a child once followed the salt wife. A girl of 8 winters, bold-eyed, heart open. She wandered from her hut during a fog-drenched night, drawn by a soft glow and a sound like lullaby. The villagers searched for hours. At last they found her on the cliff's edge, asleep and unafraid. In her hand, she clutched a black stone, still wet, still warm. They say that girl grew into a healer, that she never feared the sea, that she would sing to it, as Solva once did, and that when her time came, she walked into the tide with a smile, for she knew, somewhere beneath the waves, there is a place where sorrow softens, where the salt wife keeps her vigil, where no name is forgotten, and no love lost forever. The sea does not weep without cause. She weeps for us. She weeps for herself. And she weeps through the tears of one who loved too deeply to ever let go. And so it was. But the sea breathes on, and there is more still to remember. Have you ever stood on a headland where stone meets sea and felt the air lean close, as if it were listening, as if the cliffs themselves remembered a name they could not say? That is where the tale of Skallagrim begins, not in battle, nor fire, but in wind and stone and silence. Skallagrim was not born with that name. His birth name is long forgotten, buried beneath centuries of waves and whisper. He came from the north, where the stars wheel slow and wide, and the sun forgets its path in winter. They say his mother was a shield maiden, and his father a star reader. Others say both were lost to the frost, and he was raised by the wolves that guard the snow line. But all agree on one thing. He wore a helm black as night, forged from iron that never rusted, carved with lines no smith remembered crafting. The black helm. No other warrior bore its weight. It hummed when wind touched it. And when Skallagrim walked, birds fell quiet. He was a war leader, yes, but he did not seek conquest. He sought listening. Where others raised their axes to be heard, he wore silence like a blade. And when he raised his hand, men obeyed not from fear, but from recognition. For he walked like the sea, endless, cold, and unknowable. The helm was given to him by something not born of man. This is known. He never said how, but once, by firelight, a child asked him, "What does it feel like?" And Skallagrim had turned, slow and heavy, and said only, "It listens." The child asked no more. He wore it always, in sleep, in storm, in solitude, and beneath it his eyes grew strange. Not cruel, not mad, just distant as if they watched not the world, but the memory of it. And the helm, it changed too. It grew warm in battle, cold in grief. It wept salt when he stood near the ocean, and sang low when he walked alone through forests. Some believed it held a soul, others believed it was a soul given iron skin. Whatever it was, it made him other, and with it he brought peace. He walked into feuds that had burned for generations and laid them down like ash. He stood between blood brothers with axes drawn and gave them silence heavy enough to shatter hate. He once faced a berserker whose rage had ended 10 men, and with only a gaze made the warrior fall to his knees. Not from magic, from memory. For the black helm reminded men of things they had buried, sorrows, losses, the faces of those they had fought for, not against. And so he was feared, but not hated, until the wind changed. It came from the west, sharp, dry, full of something old. Not a storm, not a curse, a summoning. The helm began to hum without wind. It grew too heavy to lift, even for Skallagrim, until he stood still and listened. He heard no words, only the pull, and he followed it. He left behind his hall, his sword, his kin. He walked westward until the trees thinned and the stone grew sharp and dark. He found the cliff, high, broken, rising over a part of the sea. None dared name. There he knelt, and he waited. No one knows for how long. Some say a day, others say a century. But one night, when the stars all blinked in unison, gone, then returned, a shape rose from the water. Not beast, not man, a shadow of light, with hands that bled memory. It reached towards Skallagrim, and the helm began to shake. Skallagrim stood, removed it, and placed it on the ground between them. The shape leaned down, touched the helm, and vanished. The sea still. The wind softened, and Skallagrim was never seen again. But the helm remained, still black, still humming, waiting. They say it rests now beneath a cairn of sea stone, far below the tide, guarded by a single gull with flame in its eyes. That gull never flies. It stands, unmoving, staring out to sea. And if you speak a name it remembers, it will open its wings. And the sea will answer. For the helm is not gone. It is only listening. It listens to grief, to vows, to the breath before war, and to the hush that follows it. Some say it waits for the one who will wear it next. Not to rule, not to conquer, to remember. For the sea does not forget, and neither does the helm. And even now, when the wind grows still and the stars shudder faintly, you may feel it, the presence of a watcher beneath the tide, a soul shaped in iron, a name whispered only by waves. Skallagrim, the helm-bearer, the silence walker, gone, but not lost, forgotten by none but time. But shadows linger in even the quietest harbors. Have you ever stood at the edge of a forgotten harbor, where ships no longer dock, and felt something ancient watching from the fog? Have you heard the wind speak not in gusts but in sighs, like someone remembering your name before you were born? There is such a place carved into the arms of the northern cliffs, where the stone tastes always of salt and sorrow. It is called Salt Rest. No maps mark it now. The tides have taken its memory from the world, and yet it remains not seen but felt. Fishermen who sail too near find their nets full of bones instead of fish. Children who dream of water sometimes wake with sea glass in their palms, and once every 7 winters, the moon forgets to rise above it. It is said that Salt Rest was once a village, long before the sagas, when the sea was still wild and full of voices. And in that village lived the sea wife. She had no other name, none that survived. Some say she was born of the sea foam, others that she was the widow of a drowned god. But those who saw her, truly saw her, spoke of her hair as pale as frostweed, and eyes that never blinked when storms rolled in. She walked barefoot on the rocks and sang to the tide, not in songs of men, but in long, aching vows that made gulls drop from the sky and seals rise to listen. They say her voice could still the sea or summon it. But she asked for nothing, only watched and waited. Salt Rest thrived while she walked its stones. No storm touched it, no sickness stayed. The fish leapt willingly into the nets, and the whales sang close to shore. But the sea is a jealous thing. It does not give without taking. And one morning, when the gulls did not cry, and the waves held still like a held breath, a ship appeared. It was wrong. That ship, too long, too low. Its sails were made of hide, not cloth, and its prow carved not with gods but with open mouths, mouths that bit at the air. No one saw it approach. It was simply there, as though it had risen from the deep, and from it came men with hollow eyes and tongues blackened by some old assault. They walked the village slowly, as if weighing it, They asked no questions, and they feared no names. The sea wife met them at the stone pier. She did not speak. She only stood still as driftwood, her hands dripping brine. Though she had not touched the sea, the strangers offered her a gift, a bowl of water, glowing faintly green, the color of drowned lanterns. She looked once at the bowl and turned away. That night, the sea moaned low against the cliffs, and half the village vanished. No sound, no struggle, just gone. And in their place, strange salt spirals etched into the sand, moving as if they breathed. The sea wife climbed the cliff and sang. All night. Not a song of love or loss, a warning. The cliffs wept, the stones cracked, the seals howled, but the strangers remained. They built no fires. They ate nothing. They waited, and as they waited, the water in their strange bowl began to rise. It rose without rain, without touch, and when it reached the rim, it tipped itself toward the sea. A thread of that green water stretched toward the tide, and the sea answered. A great swell rose from the deep, not with foam but with shadow. Shapes writhed within it, limbs without form, eyes that opened sideways, teeth that blinked. The villagers left had no time to scream, but the sea wife walked into the surf. She did not run. She did not raise her arms. She simply walked, and when the water reached her chest, it stopped, all of it. The tide, the wind, even the shadow beast rising behind her. Still, the strangers cried out, not in fear, but in anger. Their bowl cracked. The green water hissed like steam. And then, the sea wife sang. No one remembers the sound. Not truly, but it is said the sea pulled back, not as retreat, but in reverence. The cliffs shattered into spires. The ship split without touch, and every stranger's mouth opened wide, too wide, as if the song poured into them and drowned what little soul remained. The beast behind her vanished like mist, and Salt Rest was no more, all gone beneath the sea. The sea wife walked back onto the rocks, alone, her hair tangled with kelp, her hands cupped around something unseen. Some say it was the last voice of the tide. Others say it was her heart, removed, still beating with salt and sorrow. She sat upon the largest stone, the one shaped like a sleeping face, and turned to the horizon. And there she remains. Not stone, not spirit, just silence, waiting. The villagers who vanished that night never returned. But some say their shadows walk the seafloor still, guarding her vigil. And if you ever sail too close to the cliffs where no birds fly, and hear a song in your dreams, low, endless, older than speech, turn away. For the sea wife of Salt Rest does not forget, and the sea has long memory. But listen, there is yet another name whispered in the wind. Have you ever watched the sea without expecting it to move, only to realize it was watching you back? Have you heard the hush between wave and wind, and felt it speaking in a voice not meant for the living? There is one tale left, softer than the others. Not spoken, but carried, slow and deep, inside the belly of something vast. They say it belongs to the last of the old whales, not the kind sung of in mead halls, nor the ones hunted in longboats with spears and oil-burned torches. This one does not breach. It does not sing. It remembers. Its eyes are older than storms, and within its memory swims the final saga of the North. The tale begins in silence. At the end of the world where frost no longer falls as snow but hangs mid-air like unspoken breath, there was a boy named Ivar, son of no one. He was born on the ice, not upon it, within it. Found by fisher folk in a hollow where no seals played, and the wind had long stopped howling. His skin bore runes, no one carved. His eyes shone dimly, as if reflecting stars that were no longer in the sky. The village that found him raised him out of pity, not prophecy. They called him Drith Jata, heart of the drift, for he never cried, only watched the horizon. He would sit for hours, unmoving, listening to the sea, but not the waves. Something beneath, And when the village slept, he walked to the shore and placed small stones in spirals. Always the same number. Always the same shape. None dared disturb them. 1 year. When the sun did not return, the sea began to bleed. Red foam. Flesh-thick swells. No fish. Only silence. The village prayed, but their gods had long gone mute. So they turned to Ivar. Still a boy, but something in his gaze held tide weight. He said only this: "The whale comes." That night, they heard it. A groan from the deep, longer than wind, heavier than thunder. Ice cracked, though no weight touched it. And just beyond the reef, something vast moved beneath the black water. A shape, not of ship or serpent. Too slow, too knowing. It circled once, twice, then surfaced. Only the eye, round as a shield, blinkless. It looked toward Ivar, and the boy walked into the sea without pause. Not one villager followed. Not one called out. They only watched as he vanished into the dark, and with him the whale dove. For years after, no one spoke of that night. But the sea grew quiet, and fish returned. The blood froth ceased, and above all, the horizon stopped whispering. But legends are not meant to end. One woman, old as driftwood, claimed she heard a sound on the beach some decades later. A humming, like breath through bone. She found no footprints, only a spiral of black stones where Ivar used to sit. Inside it, a small vial, carved from whalebone, sealed with amber. Inside the amber, a drop of water, still moving, though untouched. Some say it held a message. Others believed it was his memory, but the old woman said nothing. She only placed it on a high shelf and listened to the sea with closed eyes. And in her dreams, the whale spoke. Not in words, but in images. A sky with no stars. A boy of stone and frost. And a song older than even the Kraken, carried in the current like ash. They say the whale still swims. It circles the deepest trench where light has never dwelled. It carries stories in its bones. Not in its mouth, not on its skin. Within. Sagas, carved not with ink, but memory. If a ship is lost without reason, with no storm, no battle, it may be that the whale passed near and took something back to the deep. Not in cruelty, but in keeping. For the whale remembers all. The drowned, the forgotten, the songs that no tongue dares speak. And on the coldest nights, when the aurora flickers low and the tide breathes shallow, some say it can be seen, a great shadow gliding just beneath the ice, as if listening, waiting. For what? No one knows. Perhaps for Ivar to speak again. Perhaps for the world to hush long enough to remember. But in the stillness, the tale lives. Whale-born, sea-kept, and so it is. The wind softens. The waves fold into hush. The sagas retreat into the sea like old breath returning to silence. And you, dear listener, you have followed the path of whispers, from the Kraken's gaze to the Draugr's hollow, from the drowned gods to the waiting cliffs. Let it rest in you now, like mist, like memory, like the echo of something never quite forgotten.